very start of the morning, so I'll start again just so we can say hello. We're here this morning for a kind of brief webinar. It's an introduction to iPad. We're joined by the legend that is Matt Pullen. And Matt, an introduction from yourself.
Hi, everyone. Pleased to be here today. My name is Matt. I am an Apple professional learning specialist, and I also work part-time at the University of South Wales training future teachers in the use of technology.
That is very true. So thanks, Matt. We've done lots of webinars. I think actually we got asked for this introduction to iPad. I think what we've seen is a huge rise, I guess, in terms of people going down the route of iPad during these tough times, that is COVID. And I think what we often forget is that with the quantity of apps that are available, and I think there's sort of 275,000 for education specifically, there's actually a lot of great stuff that's built in into iPad. And what we wanted to do today is maybe have a look at that and talk about what you get outside of the box. But before that, just a quick introduction on myself. I am Tom Abel-Green. I am an industry specialist for education modern workplace. Don't hold the Apple badges like you do, Matt, but been around long enough to be able to share some knowledge. So looking at what we get inside and outside of the box, obviously we get that lovely device, the iPad, but there's always some great apps already built in, and we're going to kind of do a live demo today. Hopefully that's going to work, and we're going to talk to people about kind of understanding what those apps are, looking at some of the built-in apps like notes, reminders, accessibility, which is actually a really key topic, isn't it? And then maybe looking at things like the ability to do Apple Classroom, AirPlay, screen record. We'll talk about Apple Teacher, and for those who don't know what that is, that's a really great support mechanism for self-paced learning from Apple, and also talk about the education books that are available on the app, which is the iBook Bookstore. So I guess at that point, Matt, actually 170,000 apps, so my number was wrong, but we often get asked, how do I get this app to do that? So whether it's math, science, English, whatever it might be. Actually, we talk about the use of apps as a non-subject specific cross-curricular app, which is really, really important. But the ability for you to download those and have those accessed on your iPad is fantastic. And there are some things that are very specific around feedback and marking and those sorts of things, but we'll go through those, I guess. For the audience, if there are any questions, please do drop them into the chat as we go along, or if you want to know something, we're more than happy to answer those questions and show you if we can. If not, we'll certainly be able to talk about it. Matt's very knowledgeable. And at that point, we will, I guess, start with the live demo. Matt, is there anything you want to add to the bits I've just said?
No, really kind of just echo what you said. I think there is so much you can do with iPad. I think sometimes when you get hold of it, because the App Store is such a huge thing and there are so many apps available, it's almost that's your first place to go before you really explore the things that are on the device. And certainly from an educator point of view, the more I explore the things that I just have on my device, even before I even think about Wi-Fi connectivity and those sorts of things, you start to realize that this device really can do so much for you. And we'll look at lots of those things today. We'll try and be completely subject agnostic and sort of phase agnostic at the moment, and just show you what is possible. So like we said, if there's any questions, please do chuck them in, and we can give you kind of specifics around how you might use that. But as all great educators, I think as soon as you see what's possible, your ideas will start to flow in terms of what you can do with the device. So that was really the thought behind showing you some of these things today.
Absolutely. So I guess with that then, it's over to you, Matt, really. I guess I'll let you share your screen, and hopefully this will work, because we've obviously just come out with a slight technical glitch. Fantastic. What a pretty background. So
there's the device.
So I guess we just for those who've probably not got an iPad or not really kind of delved into one, it's probably worth just kind of talking about the outline that we see on the screen. We have the bar at the bottom, which is the dock, and you can see that Matt actually has a white dot on his screen. So for those who are not aware, iOS 13 and upwards has brought the ability to use the pointer devices. So what we call iPad OS has brought the pointer device. You can now connect a Bluetooth mouse, actually a wide mouse if you've got the right connection for your iPad, but also trackpad. So for those wanting to use a Bluetooth keyboard or keyboard case and have that ability, it gives you the ability to use that pointer device. Great for accessibility, but also much more of a mouse orientation. So the transition to moving to a device as a driving tool is much more easily. I notice on the left you've got a tips bit that's popped up, but also this is I forgot what they call that bit on the left now, Matt. Where the widgets are.
Yeah, so your home screen today view, I think.
That's right. That's it. Yep. And you can see actually that you've got 15 new widgets that you probably should look at whether they work or not. Just letting you know. But all of those, and you can have important information. So I'll hand over to you, Matt, and we'll start with the first one, which was really talking around the apps and the device that are useful.
Yeah, so I think I've kept my home screen pretty much as standard as when it comes out of the box. Obviously, I've changed a few things around, but you'll notice that the basic day-to-day functionality things that are useful. So the calendar, having access to your clock, the camera, which is for me one of the top tools that you'll ever use on the device. Just being able to capture learning, capture video of learning, evidencing things. Just for a teacher, it really is your go-to tool for so many things. And I think over the last few months with lockdown and teachers having to teach remotely, being able to film things and share it to students has been an absolute time saver. We'll talk about reminders. Reminders, probably again one of those things that if you've got an iOS device, if you've got an iPhone or an iPad for personal use, you probably use it sometimes, but not as often as you could. But actually, when it comes to organizing your own time and for your students organizing their time, it's a real time saver. So we'll look at that in more detail. We're going to probably spend more time looking at notes in this kind of demo, and we'll talk about how we use it. And I know certainly I've started to use it an awful lot more over the last few months, just to keep everything organized. I'm not the most organized person in the world, but it does help me keep myself organized. And then obviously the rest of the apps that you can see on here, some I have downloaded, but they're all free apps to get hold of, such as Clips and GarageBand and iMovie and those sorts of things. So we'll have plenty of time to go through all of those things. But I think maybe we should just jump into notes and start to have a play around.
Fine. Matt, I'm just going to. I'm still here. I'm just going to remove myself off the camera just to give you a bit more screen space. So I am absolutely here listening.
Yeah. So let's jump into notes then. This is notes. If you're familiar with using it, I've got my screen is currently set up in dark mode, and we can talk about that a little bit later when we look at accessibility. But it also just helps it when I'm presenting, so there's not that white glare on your screen. Notes, very kind of functional application. It obviously does what it says on the tin. It's for taking notes, and you can add those notes in a variety of ways. So, for instance, if I just I've got the keyboard attached at the moment, but you can also have the virtual keyboard pop up on your screen like this, and I could just start to type notes onto my screen for whatever it is that I want to share notes around. What's really, really useful here, though, is there are some additional features that you can add into notes which can help you, certainly when it comes to being an educator, just keeping yourselves organized. So along the bottom here, and this is where the mouse pointer comes in really handy if you're doing demos, I've got a tick icon on the screen, and this allows me to give myself notes which I can then have as a task list. So I can tick them off to say they're done. So
where's that tick icon, Matt? Is that the one in the bottom right-hand corner?
Yeah, bottom right-hand corner. This tick by here.
Okay, yeah, I got that.
I've got my keyboard attached. If I go to the virtual keyboard, it's the same place.
Oh yeah,
just at the top of that keyboard.
Yep.
So if I just type in just a few tasks, you just get the idea. So imagine this is your everyday activities. You're in a meeting. There's things that have popped up that you need to go through. What's useful around this is imagine these are specific tasks. When they're done, you can tick them off. So it actually works as a checklist for you to be able to go through things. And when you tick that, it will drop to the bottom of the list. So you know which ones you've done and you know which ones you still need to do. And it's just a really, really simple kind of thing that is often overlooked within notes, but something that can really help you stay organized at the same time. So I know that I use this at the moment. We have obviously meetings in work. and I'll get given tasks that I need to do, or things that need to be completed by a specific time. And just being able to tick them off is quite a cathartic process, I guess, to know that you don't have a long list of things that are outstanding.
You can also hide the completed tasks as well, can't you?
Hide the ones that are done, yeah. So in your settings, you can change all of this as to whether or not they just drop to the bottom of the list or they disappear altogether, yeah. So that's just a really, really nice way to do things. Now, the other thing to kind of add in is I don't necessarily have to type directly onto the screen either. I've got an Apple Pencil here. You can also use just a stylus on here. And in the bottom right hand, you'll see that there is a little pen nib in a circle. And that then brings up this sort of suite of pen tools and highlighters, etc., which means I can kind of change the way that I access note-taking on my device. We talk about this in terms of the SAMR model, and Tom, I know you're familiar with this kind of concept of, when we use technology, what are we using it for? In this instance, if I'm just writing directly on the screen here, this is just a direct substitution for using pen and paper, right? So there's no real functional change of just saving the world, I guess, by not printing out, by not having lots of paper and not buying new pens all the time, and all the plastic that goes with that. But jokes aside, it's a simple way. I've got access to being able to just do handwritten notes, draw pictures, whatever it might be. You have this kind of sketch pad at your hand. But what you also have with this, which is where I suppose it starts to augment the use of the tools, is that I can change the color of my pen in an instant. I don't have to, go to my bag and bring out pens. So it speeds up what I'm doing if I want to add in color. I also have a range of pens. So along the bottom, you'll notice I've got a pen. The second one along is a highlighter, which you can change the opacity of. So if I needed to highlight something, I can use it as a highlighter. We have a pencil tool, which just gives a different effect, obviously, to how you're drawing. An eraser, which is always useful. And something that probably shouldn't be overlooked, actually, talking to Max, my son, about using his iPad as opposed to using paper, it kind of became apparent that there's this fear of committing things using ink and paper because it's very permanent. Whereas using an iPad in this way, if I make a mistake, it's gone. And I don't need to get a new piece of paper. I don't need to waste anything. But if I make a mistake, I just simply start again because I delete it. And actually, what I found in conversation with him is his artwork has improved since starting to use digital tools because he's happy to have a go at things without the fear of it being committed. So I don't know what you found about that, Tom. I know you've got two children.
I have.
Yeah. And they both obviously use technology as well. But that idea of how the technology changes their aspect to committing things.
Yeah, so I think so yeah, I've got a son. He's the same age as yours. So both started year 7, and my daughter's the second year of college. But what I would say, absolutely not necessarily so much in notes, but in other aspects of using the iPad. So creating presentations through Keynote, for example. Having a go at something, and actually it's not quite where I want to be. I want to change or add or move stuff around, or actually let me go back and review that and make some better changes. It's really powerful. And I think you're right, it adds not only some confidence, but also skill sets that probably traditionally have not always been at the forefront of learning. So absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. So the eraser, again, yes, I can rub out things I've done, but actually having that tool there in this format is a useful thing. And the next tool along is a sort of a cropping tool. So if there's something that I've put in one place and I need to move it, it's simple, just cut and paste kind of activity. And then there's the ruler. And actually, again, from an education point of view, it's a really, really useful tool. And we'll look at kind of how we can use this a little bit later. But it just works as a virtual ruler on my screen. You'll see that as I move it, I get the different angles. So that can be quite useful. And I'm sure, any maths teachers that are watching this are already starting to think of ways that they might utilize that. But also, as a ruler, it helps me draw straight lines. And also the numbers that go up, that's measuring in millimeters. So actually, you can use it to measure distances as well. So
sorry, Matt, just to interrupt you. Can I just say that obviously you've chosen the ruler icon to put the ruler on the screen, but you're actually just running your Apple Pencil along that digital ruler on the screen, which is what's giving you the straight line.
Yeah, so you kind of just put the pen against the edge,
yeah.
And then it will just draw that straight line for you.
And actually, I never knew about the fact that it measures the distance that you're going along the ruler. I always knew the angle, but I didn't realize about the.
Yeah, and that's it, right? That's the kind of our whole idea of today. It's those simple things that are just they're there, but you've never really explored, and then you suddenly think, oh, I've never really considered how I might use that. And we'll look at it in a second, really, in terms of some of the other functions you can do within Notes, as to why that's actually quite a useful tool. If you don't have access to a rule at the moment, I know lots of schools are currently going through the whole idea of we can't supply children with certain bits of stationery because we can't share them because of COVID, etc. So to know that you've got those bits of stationery kind of already on your device, it changes the access for people, right?
Yeah.
The next thing is your color palette. So you have the kind of preset colors, your standard kind of primary colors and secondary colors in here, but there's also a button where you can choose more specifically what colors, shades that you want and everything. So there's quite a lot in there for you to be able to use just from a drawing function. Now, to take that drawing function a little bit further, I've just got a blank background at the moment, but something which is kind of hidden within Notes, but something that every time I show it to educators, they suddenly start to see Notes in a very different way. If I tap on the share icon along the top here, you'll see that I have the option to be able to share this. It is the share extension. I can share this via various means. If I've created something, I can share it to people. But one of the things to just look at here is the ability to turn on lines and grids. And when I choose that, I have these very simplistic kind of backgrounds that I can use. But if I'm doing something for, say, in maths, if I tap on this grid, I end up with gridded paper in the background of my note, which means now if I'm doing a demonstration of something, I might be looking at how to put together a line graph or something. Because I've got the grid there, it might be more in keeping with what students have in their books if they're using books. But also, if students need to use graph paper, again, from that point of view of saving paper and saving the planet, they have unlimited amounts of graph paper to practice things on. It could be setting up graphs. It could be something like symmetry, where they're looking at things. It could be repetition of shape patterns, etc. But they have that paper to just practice on, rather than them having to, utilize the spare paper that schools have lots of times at the front of the class, which obviously all costs money. So that's a really, really useful tool as well.
So Matt, just actually on that point of being a bit more sustainable, I was working on a project this summer with a school who have gone down the route of using a one-to-one iPad for actually not a massive primary school, but they anticipated by not having to buy the same quantity of workbooks, they would save anywhere between £8,000 and £10,000 in the first year, based on the fact that they would be able to do some of the work in a different way. And I think that's really important to remember. Is it's a much more holistic approach, not just around using technology. So.
Yeah. And you think how many times a student just needs to have access to something to just practice something on.
Yeah.
And again, I can change this to lines instead if it was a student just wanting to practice handwriting skills, which comes up quite a lot when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
The fact that I do have line paper here and I can just practice my spellings, I can practice something, and it's not taking up me having to buy paper, but also I can share this quite easily with the teacher. It's just a screenshot, share to teacher. Lots of schools are now thinking about their workflows from a digital point of view because they had to because of remote teaching and learning.
Yeah.
And now I can just share this to my teacher and say, look what I've created.
And how do you share that? Just whilst you're talking about that then?
So again, we've got that share icon where we changed the lines and grids. Within here, I have the option. I've got Teams on my device. So if you're a school that's using Teams or Seesaw or send it by email or Showbie, it's that kind of one tap share with my teacher.
You've got the Airdrop button actually that we should showcase there at the front. Yeah. So if you're in a classroom and you want to Bluetooth that to any other device, you can use the Airdrop functionality.
Yeah.
So
you'll just get those students, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I guess, with Classroom as well, won't we? In terms of that,
we will.
In front of people sharing, but and we weren't going to go into kind of case studies or usages, but from a teacher's point of view, how often do teachers show things, model things to students on their board. Well, if my device was connected to my board, and again, we'll talk about that in a second, if I model it on my device and then share that with the students have that on their device, which then changes your environment and where those students need to work, and do they need to be facing the board all the time. And so all of a sudden we're starting to see that just one simple thing, one simple tweak to how you teach can actually change quite a lot of things in your classroom. So quite a lot, quite a lot in there. And we've only kind of explored 2 taps of things within Notes. So that's drawing. So we've added text notes, we've added in tasks and a checklist, we've added in drawn notes, and we've changed the paper. Last couple of things to just kind of demonstrate within Notes, again, time savers for teachers. The first one is if I tap on the camera button, so along the bottom again, or at the top of your keyboard if you're using a virtual keyboard, there are different ways that I can add images into this note. And again, quite useful. Teachers will have been using iPads and other devices for a long time in terms of capturing evidence. But the discussion then goes to, well, where does that evidence go? And if you're just taking a photo using the camera, it's going to go onto your device in the Photos app. And then you have to remember that you took that photo and where that photo is. If you just do some subtle changes and use notes, so let's imagine this is a note about my maths lesson that I'm doing today, and I've seen something in the lesson that I think is going to be really good to share with the students. If I take a photo here, and apologies, I am at my desk at the moment, so it's just my keyboard in front of me. If I take a photo now of, oops, can you still see my screen?
Yeah, I can. Yep, no problem.
So if I take a photo now of my messy desk, what I can then do is add that as a note into my notes. And if I scroll down, you'll see that that photo is there. And then I can use this photo. So just by tapping on the photo, I can go back into Markup again. So again, I've got that icon at the top of the screen here. And I can now draw directly on this. So again, I'm kind of bringing the real world, but into a maths world. If I use the, it's probably not the best example here, but if I use the ruler now on the screen, I can actually measure the angles. So look, you can imagine this is something that I want to measure the angle of, the device on the screen or something. So you can use this to actually measure those angles, draw those lines where we might be looking at, symmetry or something, or different angles of connectivity. So all of a sudden now the teacher's kind of got those tools at their disposal to start to think about the use in the classroom. Another couple of things that occur when you take a photo in Notes, if I now tap on this plus icon, there are some additional things in here, so I can write directly onto the screen. So you can imagine a student maybe taking a photo of trees and they might want to annotate the trees. They could handwrite on it or they could add text. But one thing that's really useful is this magnifier. And when I turn the magnifier on, I get this little window that appears. I can make bigger and smaller using the blue dot, and the green dot increases the magnification. So again, from a science teacher, I always think science teachers, or any practical subject really, you can really emphasize something within the images that you're taking. As an ex-PE teacher, I can imagine using this to have a look at, angle of release or foot placement or something. You could have the whole image that you're focusing on, but then you want to draw attention to something very specific in the image. So again, a science teacher taking a photo of a leaf and then highlighting some of the very specific elements of the leaf so students can focus on it. So it's just, it's just a really useful tool. But the other thing is I've taken that photo, but now it's in my note. So it's kept here. So which means I can find it at a later date. It's not stored in my photos where I might then also take 100 other photos that day of various other things. It's time stamped. I've got the time at the top of when I took the note. I can add in specifics about what that note is about, and we'll talk about folders, etc. in a second, as to how to organize yourself as well. The second one then to look at within the photos is the ability to scan documents, and this has really become a very useful tool, I suppose, when schools went into lockdown and they were having to think about how do we take existing resources that we might have and share these with our students in a digital means. We've got lots of resources that we think would be very useful for our students, but actually, how do we get the paper out to them? How do we share this with our learners? So if I tap on scan documents, I've got a document here that I'll just quickly put on my desk. And what this allows me to do, if I just hover over the top, you see the yellow outline kind of trying to pick up that document. When it selects that document, when it gets it in place, you'll notice that the lines appear and the dots appear. You can correct this if you need to, but actually that was pretty accurate. And when you tap Keep Scan, you actually have this as a scanned in document. So you've turned that kind of analog, document into something which is now a digital version. Along the top, you'll see on the screen, I have the option to change the filters, change the crop of that document, but also rotate the document as well. So I've taken it on an angle on the side, but I want this to be upright. So just by a few taps, you can change that. And then equally, if I tap on that share icon again, I can choose Markup as a tool, and I can now sketch directly over the top of this. So it could be that I want to draw attention to something on the document, and now I've got that ability to draw directly onto it. So even if you're looking at the very basic model of substitution, of you've got some worksheets that students you use in the classroom for students to complete, you could digitize them, and now students can have those documents in a digital form. They'd be able to write directly over the screens, and it just, again, it kind of just speeds up that process in the classroom.
So can I just jump in there, Matt? My daughter, who's doing her various courses at college, has used this tool massively to scan a document to then be able to highlight it where it's important bits of information, and she's been able to actually from there then include it into other documents that she's been using. And I think it's a really powerful tool, and I think that, people forget about the scan, because there is an app called, I think there's various scanning apps, but there's one I've been using for years, and then suddenly realized I didn't need that app. I've already got it built in, and it can store it, and everything else is fantastic. So really powerful tool.
I think about my students in university and like note taking in a lecture. Everything's in here. If they want to take handwritten notes, write notes, but also just the function of just take a photo of the screen at the front, because it's something where I might share something to the learners, and then they can make their own notes on top of it. So, but then it's also all kept in one place. They know if they had that lesson on that date, they can just find that again. So it just speeds things up. Whereas if you use these things separately, like a separate scanning tool, and then you use the camera, and then you have a different note-taking app, then you also have to remember where you've put everything. So it can just cause, it's not confusion, but it's just simplicity, right? We're just trying to make people's lives a little bit quicker and easier. And
that's another great feature actually of iPad specifically, is the search feature. So it's not an app specifically, but just the ability to search just directly from a home screen, for example, and it will search any documents that are stored is really fantastic as well. So
yeah, and even within notes, then I can drag down. So
that's
similar
right.
function,
Yeah,
I can drag down here, but it will also search for handwritten notes as well. So it will pick up that I've said hello here, but it also picks up that I've said hello in any other apps or any other notes that I've tried. And this is just my training device.
Yes,
I tend to write the same thing all the time, but it will search for all of those things as well. So you're right, it just kind of speeds up that process that you might go through as an individual. So they're the different things that you can add into notes. If I bring my keyboard back up again, there's a couple of other things that you can also add in. So you'll notice that it gives you predictive text down the bottom. I've currently got my keyboard set to French by the looks of things. There we go, let's turn it back to English. So predictive text down the bottom. So if it knows that I'm going to potentially start typing something, you can use that. It's a great accessibility feature. Also, kind of a thesaurus to some extent. It's not actually a thesaurus, but it can give you ideas and prompts of maybe different words you might use. But again, we're not going to go into the whole literacy kind of element of it. And then over on the left-hand side, just organizing yourself, the ability to add a table in as well. So, it might be that I want to just quickly demonstrate something or allocate people different tasks to do. I can just type directly into those boxes.
Don't send me a task.
Everyone needs tasks. So, and you can just add those in as well. So again, it's all in one place, and again, just speeds up the process. So, again, I can think science teachers, maths teachers, anyone really that needs something that might require students to organize something. And obviously self-organization and independence is something which is really, really useful at the moment, certainly as we kind of consider that remote blended learning opportunities that we might have. Very last thing to show is the organization. So you'll notice that on the left hand side here I've got a set of folders. You can have all of your documents, so everything that's in all iCloud is every note that I've made. But you can have specific folders then for different things. So you just simply go to new folder and type in, I don't know, let's do a numeracy one. Oops.
It's also worth pointing out. Oh, you've locked stuff. It's worth pointing out when you're creating those folders that they'll sit under the account that you choose. So currently that's set in your iCloud, but if you've got a college or school account, which is an Office 365 or G Suite or whatever it might be, you can also have it linked under there.
Yeah. So if I go into that new folder now, there's obviously no notes in that, but any note I create will go in there. If I go on to this literacy one, for example, you can see I've already got some notes in here.
And if you accidentally put a note in the wrong folder, you can just drag and drop it into the right folder, or you can move it, can't you? So it's quite simple.
Yeah, you could just move them. Yeah. So again, if I jump into a note here, let's say that I've created this note. If I tap on the share icon again here, I can just go to move to folder.
Yeah.
Gives you a list of folders.
Absolutely.
Tap done.
So it's really good if you're splitting that down into subjects, for example, or whatever it might be. So
yeah.
It's also I know it's not a massively important one, but there is a way with the Apple Pencil to set it that when you double tap the screen from the lock screen, it opens your notes up straight away.
It does, yeah. So if I go to my lock screen at the moment, it's pretty hard to demonstrate this without people being able to see my screen. But I've got my pen at the moment. If I tap my screen, it will take me instantly into a note.
Yep.
So, if I'm in that meeting, if I'm in a session and I think, oh, I should make a note of that, again, it's a really quick way to do it.
Yep.
You can also create a note. You have to set this yourself within your settings, and we'll have a look at this, by just dragging down from the top right corner of the screen as well. And you'll see that I have the pen inside the square here. If I tap on that, that will also take me directly into a note. So again, there's kind of multiple ways to kind of jump into your notes to be able to do that. So, oops.
Right password.
There we go. No, doesn't want me in. There we go.
So what's the next app? Sorry, Matt, go on.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so reminders is probably the next one to go to. Now, we kind of looked at that idea of having tasks that you can set within different sections within notes. But what reminders allows you to do is probably go a little bit more specific about those things that you need to do. And we'll all have reminders of different things. If someone pops into a room and says, oh, remember you've got to go and take the cat to the vet, or you've got to go and pick up some milk on the way home from work, or whatever it might be. And as educators, we get this a lot where, a phone call's come into the school and someone's asked you or telling you that a certain student needs to go home at a certain time, or you've got a meeting, or you've had a phone call, can you phone a parent back or whatever. And what reminders can just simply do is just help you stay organized with that. So if I go into reminders and go to add new reminder, very similar to how we did this in notes, I might just put in here, call Matt's mum. There we go. So simple reminder that I've added in. If I tap on the reminder itself, though, the eye icon on the side gives you a lot more things that you can add into it. So if I tap on that eye, I can put some notes in. I can ask it to remind me on a specific day. I can ask it to remind me a specific location. I can ask it to remind me when I'm messaging, and so many other things to just really help you stay organized. So I know that if I've got to call Matt's mum tomorrow at 4 o'clock, well, if I tap on that, I can set an alarm. I can ask it to remind me at a specific time. So we can change this to 4 o'clock. And now my device is going to remind me at that time. Oops. Change it back. It's going to remind me at that time, just by sending a little notification on my screen, that I need to do this. I can also ask it to remind me at a location. So it might be that I need to make that phone call when I arrive at home or I arrive at work. So I can set that location on my device. So let's, for instance, it's come up as getting in my car. So it knows where my car is. So if I tap on that, every time I get in my car, it's going to remind me to phone Matt's mum. So probably not the greatest example. Maybe we could change this to when I go to Newport, which is where I work. Or it might be when I arrive home. What's great here is that you have this option of the blue line, that's kind of your proximity. So depends on how close I want to be to that proximity. When I cross that blue line and towards that location, my phone device, iPad, will ping to tell me I need to do something. So we might all have those kind of moments where, oh, when I go to work tomorrow, I need to remember to do this. Well, this is the thing that reminds you actually when you get to work, as opposed to remembering to do it in the morning and then forgetting on your journey in. So that saved me an awful lot of times, I suppose, in doing those things. One other thing to highlight here, though, is the use of Siri, because that might take a long time for me to put the process in. So what I can also do is I can use Siri to do this. Hopefully this works. I've got a couple of Apple devices in my room. They might all kick off at the same time, but remind me to call Matt's mum at 2 o'clock tomorrow.
Done.
So nice and simple as that. That's automatically made that note. It knows that I need to do it tomorrow because I said tomorrow. It's picked up the time as well. So now all of those kind of bits of information have been set for me as well. And I also could have said, remind me to do it when I get home, or remind me when I get to work, depending if you've got your work address set into your device, or remind me when I get to Starbucks, or whatever it is that you're trying to remind yourself of doing. So really, really simple way to just set those reminders on your device. It could be, remind me to mark 10 scripts tonight when I get home. Remind me to, update my timetable or whatever it might be. So really, really useful, and really useful for students to get into that. They can organize their own time to do certain things. Remind me to do my homework at 4 o'clock tonight before I go out to play. Remind me to do the washing up, whatever it might be. But they're taking that kind of independent approach to setting themselves reminders. So although the device is reminding them to do it, they're taking ownership of knowing that they need to set those reminders.
We set our son's chores through the reminders, shared reminders.
Yeah. It's just, we all live busy lives at the moment, right? And if there's anything out there that can just save you a little bit of time and obviously help your children into getting themselves more organized.
Yeah, he's got to earn his keep, isn't he? So
exactly. Yeah.
I'm only joking.
So reminders, it's a simple one, but again, probably often overlooked by many, seeing how simple it is. And when you integrate that then with the use of Siri, it takes you 2 seconds to do things. And from a teacher point of view, like I said, the amount of times you're asked to remember something and then you're straight back into teaching and then you forget that you had to do something, it can just really help with that whole process of organizing yourself from your day-to-day activities that you need to do. Fab. So we're kind of talking about personalization and setting these things up. Maybe we should jump into accessibility now and take a look at some of those functions.
I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So settings is where accessibility sits, and within here on the left-hand side, accessibility is in the list. And what you'll notice here is accessibility is kind of baked into everything that sits on any Apple device, really. So through your iPhone, your iPod, your Apple Watch, your iPads, your Mac, your MacBooks. Basically, accessibility is really at the heart of everything you do, which means it's on the device. It's not relying on the app creator to have that function. So if you turn this on your device becomes accessible, and the apps kind of fall in line with those things as a result. So a couple of things to go through here. There really isn't enough time to go through everything accessibility on a device, but there's a couple of standout features that I'll point out, and Tom, you might have a few as well that you think are really, really useful to highlight. The first one I'm going to point out is this one under spoken content. And what spoken content is great with is if I turn on this one here that says speak selection, when you select the text, it will read the text back to me. When I switch this on, I get the option to also highlight content, and you can choose whether you want to highlight words, sentences, or words and sentences. I'm just going to choose words for now, and you can choose the color that you want to highlight. Now, if I jump back to notes quickly, just to use this as an example, if I go into my note here, if I select the text at the top, you'll see above that text now is the option to have it speak. And if I tap on speak, Oh, the volume is off on my device. You should have noticed the green highlight come up over the text. So I'll try that one more time. I don't want to say it out loud at the moment. I think it's because I'm connected to the computer at the moment. But that text then speaks through. Now that's not just in notes. It's anything on the device where you can select text. So, for example, if I jump into, if I go to a BBC page, surprise, surprise, it's a coronavirus thing. If I select the text here, I won't select all of it. But again, I get that speak option appear above. If I tap on speak, again, you can see the text kind of highlighting as I go through. And apologies, the sound isn't coming through on the webinar, but you can see how you can have the device talk back to you.
And I think just going back to the accessibility piece, the ability to change the color of the text when it's speaking is also down to another accessibility feature, especially around dyslexia and so on. So really important to kind of tie those two pieces together. It's fantastic. And actually, I should also say, if you change the language to your keyboard to a different language, it would also speak it in that language as well. So that's a really powerful tool, especially if somebody's studying languages.
Yeah. And again, so from a languages point of view, but also students that are new to English, they might be able to understand spoken English, but not understand written English. So and even within that, if you think about students that are studying a new subject and there's new vocabulary and they just don't know how to pronounce those words, even if you're talking about university students that could be embarrassed to say, well, I'm not sure how you say that. And to just be able to select the word on their device and have it speak to them, you get the pronunciation right. It can kind of just takes away some of those issues of people panicking that they don't want to be embarrassed in front of a group of peers. So really, really useful tool there. Another thing, which again I think is useful just to point out to everybody, we talk about accessibility, and I think people instantly jump to like special needs and I've been diagnosed with something. The accessibility is about making this accessible regardless, and sometimes you don't even know that you need the thing until you see the difference it can make. I am getting on in age, shall we say, and I've noticed that one thing that I need to do on my devices now is turn on larger text, which just gives me the ability to change the size of the text on the screen. And again, this works across apps. This goes across the whole device. And again, what that does is it means that my device is personalized to me. I don't look any different to anyone else who's got an iPad because we've all got the same device. But on my device, I've had to make the text really big because I know my eyesight's not as good as it used to be. So again, just really, really nice to have those things on the device, which just allow you to access things in a different way. And again, if you think about students in your class, I remember being in a classroom and seeing a student that had a huge magnifying glass that they had to hold over their documents. Well, that might help the student, which is great, but at the same time it shows that they're very different to everybody else because not everybody else is having to use that device, and so there's an impact there on self-esteem.
And I think we should just highlight the wonderful story from the Ferrers Academy, where Greg Hughes is. They have a student whose education has actually been transformed by the use of iPad, and she's severely I guess has that disability with her eyesight, and it's a fantastic story. So if anyone wants to see that case study, it is on our case studies webpage, but shows exactly as you've mentioned, Matt, the inclusivity that you can get through everyone having the same device, but actually very, very personal device. And I would argue that I've got some accessibility features set in just because they allow me to use the iPad in the way that suits me best. So yeah,
I think having been to a few Apple sessions on accessibility, I think and I wouldn't want to say this wrong in any way, but I think the process for them is that if they plan for the people in the margins, if they plan for people that need that thing, then everyone benefits, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the thing with certainly some of these other things that we'll look at now in terms of the color filters, etc. You mentioned dyslexia before. We know that we have the ability on the device, and it's just a simple kind of invert. Now I've got white on dark as my basic, so therefore when it does the classic invert, it turns it back to black on white.
Yeah.
But that whole idea of, you mentioned dyslexic students before, just being able to have that the color of the display slightly differently. Well, that's kind of a very specific thing. But then if you go into color filters, if I turn on color filters, these give you kind of the more common kind of types of color blindness. So again, this doesn't show necessarily over the camera because this is personal to my device. So my device now, I've changed the color filters on the screen just by tapping on these. So again, if you were colorblind, that's going to help you straight away. But one thing that, because it's been designed for everybody and not just colorblind people, there's also the option to turn on color tint, where you can change what that looks like on your device. And again, another story of showing this to a group of students, it wasn't to benefit them, but one student kind of put their hand up in the middle of the session and just went, "Oh my word, I didn't realize I needed this until you've shown me what my screen can look like differently by changing this." They'd never been diagnosed with a color blindness or anything like that, and in fact they didn't have color blindness. They just found that by changing the intensity and the hue, it just made it easier for them to see the screen. And so I think that's another important thing, which is why I think accessibility is not for the few, it's for everybody. It's just there to just make sure that your device is set up in a way that works best for you.
And also, just not related to accessibility directly, but also a feature that's Apple have talked about, and I guess any device that's got the electronic screen, is the ability to dim the brightness of a screen at a certain time of the day. So Apple has a feature called Night Shift, and you can it sits under the display and brightness, just if you're there, Matt, on the above your accessibility bit. So display and brightness, go left a bit. Oh yeah, just there. So if you go there, you've got the night shift. You've currently got yours off, but mine's set so that in the evening, at about 8 o'clock, it switches from a kind of a blue light, which is something that gets talked about heavily, and goes much more yellowy. So again, there's some mental health stuff there as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah, really
sorry.
Useful.
Yeah.
And I suppose whilst I'm here, like I said, my screen is currently set to dark mode. You can have it to light mode, which is the more traditional way of looking at things. I just find when I do presentations, it's quite bright on the screen, so I tend to use dark. But you can have that set to automatic, which is quite interesting because it just basically means at a certain time of the day it will change. And again, it's these small features which show that there's been a lot of thought gone in the background about users of the device. As opposed to it just being a special feature for individuals. Like you said about blue screen and being able to go to sleep at a certain time, and blue light having that impact on whether you can drift off to sleep and those sorts of things. So it's a lot of thought's gone into it. So
I think it's just worth saying, because I know we're going to move on to some of the other bits now. The accessibility tab is there for everyone. It's not a hidden feature. So absolutely do go and explore it. You can always undo what you've ever done, so make use of that. So I think it's worth, just conscious of time, Matt, so I think we're just going to be looking at some of the other things, but we were talking about maybe the AirPlay screen record stuff next, and classroom.
So again, I'm gonna jump into settings for this, because lots of these things are found under something which is called your control center. So on your device, if you scroll down from where the battery icon is, in that corner you reveal this control center, and control center is where you can do an awful lot. So currently at the moment I'm sharing my screen to do the webinar, so it shows up as dot connector. On your screen it would show up as mirror screen, and when you choose that you'll get a list of places where you can screen mirror. So at the moment these are the ones within my house that I can mirror to. If you're in a classroom, if you've got Apple TV, or you've got screen sharing software on a PC, depending on what your setup is, you'll see your classrooms appear and you can mirror directly to the screen. Now, what that does is it means that you are then mobile as that teacher. You don't need to be fixed to the front of the class anymore to do demonstrations. You can now freely walk around the class. You can use your device as a visualizer to show students work to the screen at the front. There's so many opportunities, which is why we talked about that. How does this change my environment? Some of the other things then, screen record being one of them, I can adapt this whole screen, this control center here. If I go to settings, and again, kind of we're talking about this from an accessibility point of view, like how do I want this to work for me? Control center is here underneath general. I can then tap on customize controls. And basically the things that are in the top here are on my control center. And these are all additional things that you can have very quick access to. And the one thing to highlight here is the screen recording. And if I turn on screen recording, you'll see that it pops into this top section. And if I go back to my screen, my control center, screen recording is this icon here. Now, because I'm sharing my screen at the moment, it's not going to allow me to then also record my screen because it's using the same video feed. But if I tap on this, it will then give me a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and I can record everything I'm doing on my screen. So from a teacher point of view, really great if I couple that with notes to screen record any of those demonstrations I'm doing for my students. I've then got a video that I can give to my students via AirPlay that they can watch as many times as they want. I could also share it to Teams or Shobi or Seesaw or whatever VLE I'm using so that they could have that at home. So again, they can watch the process as often as they want. And again, it's little things like that kind of just change the dynamic of what does a classroom look like.
It's worth noting, actually, Matt, if you are using Teams and you want to share your screen for any reason, that it goes from that control center, that screen record, and you can choose to record and broadcast, which is a fantastic tool. So again, the next step is then to be able to share that with your students or colleagues. Yeah.
Yeah. So just for an example, then let's imagine that I've gone into notes. I'm going to show my students how to do very simple maths. So let's just say 2 + 2 is 4. And if I've recorded that, it gets replayed as a video. So certainly in things like maths, where the process is probably the most important thing rather than the answer, because you could guess the answer, right? But if you need to get the process right. When you model this to your students, in my situation here, I might say, do you know what, this is my whiteboard at the front of the class, but it's on my iPad. So therefore I can stand anywhere in the class to do it. I can demonstrate that mathematical problem. So if I just use a proper pen. So let's just say I'm doing 2a = 6. So therefore I need to divide both sides by...
Good luck.
I'll divide both sides by 2. That would be 3, which means A is 3. Okay, so when you get to this bit, and that's all the students see, is that, well, how did I get to that bit? If I've recorded it as a video, that student can watch that 20-second video clip as many times as they want, and they can understand the process. The same as if you were doing something, showing them how to, put a graph together and where to put the dots and how to label it or whatever. Or if you're showing them something in PE where you're looking at angle of release of a javelin or whatever it might be, you can actually start to, show them the process as opposed to just the outcome.
Did you get an A in art, by the way, Matt?
Sorry?
Did you get an A in art?
I actually got a C in art. But that's a good little picture of a javelin throw. So again, really, really simple things, but just can suddenly change how you work in your classroom. To just organize students, to give students different ways to access things. And I had this conversation with my son yesterday because he's gone back into the classroom now after, 3 months of homeschooling, where he did rely on videos from his teacher to show him how to do things. And he's gone back into the classroom now, and he's kind of thinking, well, those videos are still just as useful for me now, even if I'm in the classroom, because the teacher doesn't necessarily have time to keep showing me the same thing over and over again. And if the teacher records the video and lets him watch the video in whatever means necessary, if they're iPads or whatever, then that's going to save him time waiting for the teacher to come and fulfill his needs of showing him again. But also it saves the teacher time having to repeat themselves. So when we look at that whole idea of how can we change the environment, how do we work, they're really, really practical, useful, time-saving things.
And probably not for now in another discussion, but we often spend a lot of time working with leadership teams talking about how do we make this program sustainable if we bring in devices and bring in the iPads. And actually, the classroom, the modern day classroom is very different to the traditional Victorian classroom, which we still often see. And teachers do a fantastic job, don't get me wrong, but it's a tough job. And when money is tighter than ever, one of the things that we often spend our time talking is how do we, if we're going to give teachers an iPad, for example, make that their whiteboard, how do we then save money in other areas in the classroom? And actually, a lot of schools are still buying legacy or historic hardware like interactive smart boards, which, by the way, are great if they're being used to their full potential, but 90% of the time they're not. So all of a sudden we can save money in other areas in the school, whether we're not buying books or we're not buying 75-inch interactive boards, we're just buying 75-inch LED panels, using an iPad to then stream to that big screen, and having the teacher be able to move around the classroom are all other areas of this much bigger conversation. And that brings additional power to having devices such as iPad, for example, as that teaching tool. So I think that we've covered that in other webinars, and but absolutely, if anyone wants a conversation about that sort of stuff as well, we can do that. So
yeah.
Matt, I know we're going to talk about Apple Teacher, but I think we might do that at the end. And I don't know whether we should just maybe look. Oh, so we're going to look at Classroom. Sorry.
Yeah. So Classroom. This is an interesting one to kind of show as a webinar. This is obviously something that you would do in your classroom, but I do have a second device here just to kind of show what's possible. So when you go into Classroom, not to be confused with other tools that are called Classroom. So I demo this quite a lot in schools, and they say, oh, we've got Google Classroom, so we don't need Apple Classroom. They're not the same thing. Okay, so they do different things. Yep. What I can do in here is I can very quickly create a class and have that on my screen. When I've created the class, it's going to ask me to be able to invite students. And at this point, it gives me this code on the screen. What the students do at that point is they go into settings on their device, and they would have the option to join that class. So I'm very quickly going to do this on a second device so that you can see the process. You'll see that I've now popped up on the screen, and I tap add. What I now have is ways to interact with the student's device from the teacher device. Very, very quickly to go through this, and we can support schools with this. If you want to find out more information, please do get in touch with Tom and the team. I can open apps on their device, so it will find the apps that I have on my device that the student has on their device as well. And if I choose the app, it's going to open it on the device, and you can see over here that student is now in the Notes app. We can do the same thing for websites. So again, I can go to Navigate, I can go to Safari, I can choose a website that I want to push the students to, and again, you'll see instantly that student's been pushed into that website. So again, real time saving, stops the students getting confused, stops students having to type in something on their device and maybe spelling it wrong and going to the wrong place. So can really, really support that flow in the classroom. But something which is really, really useful, as well as being able to see which apps they're in.
So if you have multiple students, Matt, and they were supposed to be in Safari, but they've gone into another app, you can actually see by the icon there, can't you, that they're actually off the mark a little bit.
Yeah, so if I have 30 students in the class, I might, and some of them are in Notes. It might say 29 are in Safari and one is in Notes. Yeah. What's also really useful is the ability to go to screens. So some PC users will know this from IT suites, this ability to be able to see the student screen. So now on my screen, if I pinch in, I can zoom to make it bigger, which is a really, really nice feature as well. I can see what that student is doing, and you'll see that I'm moving on the other screen now. So in real time, I can see what the student is doing.
It's worth noting that the student will see that you're doing that.
Yes, yeah. So depending on how you're set
privacy
up in the
concerns.
Yeah. So if they're your devices and they're enrolled in the school, the student kind of automatically gives the rights to the school because it's a school device. If it's a personal device, it pops up on the screen to ask permission in order to do that. Because exactly as you said, it's private, it's my device, so I have the option to say whether or not I want someone to be able to see my screen. Different if your setup in school is different. So again, as I jump through things, you can see on my screen, I can jump between pages. I can go to different documents. It's all pretty live, which just means that the student will be able to share their screen to the front, and the teacher can think about things like assessment for learning and how do I demonstrate this, that I want to share something the student is doing that's really good. So Classroom, again, really, really useful just for organizing yourself in the classroom, to just help the students navigate themselves around the device, just to cut down on that speed of finding things. Last thing to then kind of look at, and just conscious of time, we said we were going to look at Apple Teacher. We're not going to go into huge detail, but just really to highlight, Apple Teacher is a tool that's there for people to use to develop their skills. Lots of the things that we've looked at in this session are covered within Apple Teacher in terms of the skills that you can develop on the iPad. So when you first log in, you get the option here to look at skills for iPad or skills for Mac. And you can go into this, and it kind of just breaks down lots of those things. So we've looked at the control center, we've looked quite a lot at notes, we've alluded to Siri. There are lots of other kind of out of the box things that you can learn around. So if I tap into any one of those icons, it gives you this overview. This is what you can do on your device. What's nice from an education point of view is when you get to the end of each one of those skills, you do get the option to earn a little badge to sort of say, well done, you've learnt those processes. But also when you go through the earn the badge section, there are kind of scenarios that it gives you, which can then get you thinking about, well, how would I use this in my classroom? So I've looked at how to use the camera, how to use photos. But when you go on to the badge, I'm glad I used this one because I got 5 out of 5. It will actually give you some scenarios to think, this is what you're trying to do, how would you do it? So it's kind of an immersive learning kind of process. Now, those processes are also highlighted within each skill. So it talks about trying it, but if you scroll down, it also talks about applying it. So these are things that you could do in your classroom. So Apple Teacher is more than just a badging system. It's also a process of thinking about how to apply these things in your classroom. When you've done all the badges, you also then can kind of go into Apple Teacher. So it's not like a one-stop shop. I've got my badge, so I don't need to use it anymore. When you go back to your home screen, there are lots of different activities within here. So this is updated fairly regularly. So this is one of the newest ones that came out during COVID, which is activities, creative activities for kids. And lots of these are created by educators, curated all together by Apple to put in one place, but lots and lots of ideas for things that you can do with your iPad around creativity. And again, Tom and the team can talk to you a lot more about the Apple curriculum and how that can support you in your classroom to develop.
And I think it's worth noting that this is a free resource, so you can see the URL at the top is appleteacher.apple.com. If you want to point yourself to there and sign up, please do so. We'd recommend using a personal email address rather than your institution address, and that's the same for students. I would say that it's the free resource is self-pay, so you can go at any time. And actually, we know a lot of students, the children, and Matt, your son has absolutely flown through the Apple Teacher Awards and has done some great stuff, and I know you showcased that. So it's something that is really, really valuable and really supportive and gives some really great insight to some of the basics that are available there. And I think that also then leads on to probably just going to the bookstore, Matt, if you don't mind, just to showcase that in the books app that you get here. Sorry, just actually before we go, don't move from there, but I noticed Matt had what looked like an app icon for Apple Teacher. There isn't an app for Apple Teacher. That was a WebKit that you saved the badge to the home screen. So just know that you can only access it through any browser. It doesn't have to be an Apple browser, so the Safari, it can be any other browser, but really powerful. So the bookstore, I think, is really important to understand that there are some really great education focused books here, and Apple have got some there. You can see this will allow you to look at the Everyone Can Create program from Apple, the Everyone Can Code, and there are teacher resources as well as student resources. And Matt, not to jump on, but is there anything else you would add in the short space that we've got left about the bookstore?
I just think it's just good to know. I think people think of the bookstore as being like, where would you get your digital version of a book that you might be reading? But actually, for educators, this is full of books that are made by educators, just as reference guides, things that you might want to try out. So if you look through this, these are recommended books. Oh, there's a good
book. Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder who that Matt Pullen is.
but around creativity, these are all made by educators. So that this documenting the things they've done in their classroom. This one here, podcasting in the classroom by a friend of ours, Simon Pyle.
Yeah.
Looking at how do I get started with podcasting, and they're made by educators, which is great for us as educators because we know we can believe in them as books. There are loads in here, and the majority of them are absolutely free. People make them because they want to share what they're doing with everybody else. So these ones all on remote learning obviously is a collection that's come up recently, but so many others. So creativity in the classroom, you pointed to the coding, but if you go through there's so much in here, including kind of case studies on schools. And I know that you guys at Academia have helped schools create their own books on their vision of what they wanted to do with technology, and you can find all of these within the bookstore. So lots in there that you can find and support you with.
Absolutely worth, again, free to browse. There's no commitment there. Go and have a look. So Matt, I think I'm just going to ask you to unshare your screen just so we can go back to the slides.
Yeah.
Hoping it's going to.
There we go.
Okay. Let me just see if it's going to bring my screen back on, and I'll just add that presentation again. So we've done the live demo. So I think most importantly, there's a couple of things that I just want to round off on. Is the first thing is a huge thank you to you, Matt, and I think probably just bigger than you, even though your emoji has a massive head. I had to do that, sorry. Is that the community from Apple Professional Learning Specialists is a really important partnership that we have as academia, but also that is available to education establishments across all levels. You're supporting us with customers across the K-12 market all the way through to higher education. And I think what we want to ensure is to know people to know that there is the facility for us to support you. So if you are using iPads and you think you could do a bit more with it, reach out to us. We can work with you to support that. There is some subsidy that comes as part of that with Apple, and we work really closely with our customers to ensure that technology can be used to its best capabilities. And it's a personal journey, right? So it's not a one size fits all. The whole point of working with people like yourself is because you have the experience of being in the classroom. I know you work very closely with the Teachers of the Future, Matt. But please do reach out. That resource is there, and we want to ensure that these projects, at a time when technology is being used more than ever, it's absolutely changing the way that we live our lives, the way that we communicate, and absolutely the way that we work and we learn. So make use of that. My details are always available, and I'm happy to have those conversations with customers. If you're not down the iPad journey yet and you want to go down that journey, there's also some great resources that we can support you around strategic planning that Matt and I will happily run with you, or look at vision and plan sessions. So please do make use of that. And if you feel that today's been valuable and a colleague would want to benefit and see from that, please share the recording. It will be available once we have finished, not immediately, but give us a day or two. And then I guess lastly, just to thank you for attending the webinar today. It's been a real pleasure to have you. We haven't had any questions. That's either because people are bored or because we've done a great job. Hopefully it's the latter. But if you do have questions, we'll be on for sort of another 2 minutes, and feel free to ask. And at that point, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ryan, who's been our moderator in the background, although his camera won't show him. But thank you, and we hope that you have a great day. So with that, what I will do is I will stop our slide presentation. I'll leave our video running, and if you want to ask us any questions, please do. We'll give it a couple of minutes, and then we will log off. Have a great day. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.